Hi, my name is Carrie Case, and I'm going to be your facilitator for today's lecture. Today what we're going to do is talk about run-ons. We're going to discuss the different kinds of run-ons and how to fix them. Let's get started. So the first are basic identification of what a run-on is. And remember that a run-on occurs when the writer is unable to recognize where one complete thought ends and another thought begins. So typically this is when we might put one, two, three or more complete sentences together, but we're not properly punctuating that sentence. And so because of that, we're creating that run-on. We're squishing a bunch of complete sentences together without using the punctuation we need to use. Now we have three types of run-ons. We have the and run-on, we have the fuse run-on, and we have the comma splice. Now you have to understand what each of these run-ons looks like because you have to be able to fix each of them appropriately. We will talk briefly today about how to fix them, but the lectures of coordination, subordination available to you will also answer these questions more specifically as to how to fix each of these sentences. Now in each of these examples, you'll typically see a red sentence and you'll see a green sentence. The red sentences in these following slides are the incorrect sentences, and the green ones are the repaired sentences. So the and run-on, which to be honest at this stage I don't see a lot of. I tend to see more of our comma splices. But I do have some students who use and run-ons, so I do want to make sure to address what these are and how to fix them. So this is again when we have two or more relatively long independent clauses, and an independent clause is another phrase or another meaning for a complete sentence. So we have two or more relatively long complete sentences, and they're connected with a conjunction. But unfortunately, many conjunctions require punctuation. If they're lacking that punctuation, then the sentence is considered a run-on. It's the punctuation and the conjunctions together that keep a sentence from being a run-on. So our incorrect example here is, I met Charlize in a yoga class at the YWCA and we liked each other immediately and we soon became friends. I typically like to classify these as those little bouncy ball songs where the ball goes along the words and you just keep kind of going. And that's what that and tends to create. It's like you keep going and you keep going and you keep going. And so what we then need to do is figure out how to fix this sentence so that it's not one big long rambling run-on. Again, as I've said throughout many of these lectures, there's no exact right or wrong way. There's just often the best way to write the sentence. And so we're only going to look at one type of correction, but there are many options for how to correct these sentences. So in this particular correction, instead of running it all together, what we did was we broke it into two pieces. And the reason why we did this is because one of these sentences tends to act almost like a topic sentence. So if you look at these groups of words, or groups of sentences, we have, I met Charlize in a yoga class at the YWCA. That's kind of our introduction. So to put a period after that is completely appropriate. And then we go on to say, you know, more supporting details about what happened once we were there, and we liked each other immediately and we soon became friends. These are two things that happened while we were there and once we had met. So for this particular sentence, we did end one sentence with a period and then joined the other two with, as you will notice, a comma and a conjunction. So you'll notice that there is a comma after immediately before our and. And to be honest, most of the time when we use and, we're going to be using a comma when we're dealing with sentences. Most of the time. Not every time, but most of the time. And we'll discuss that more in coordination, in the lecture for coordination. So going on to the next kind of run-on, we also have what's called the fused run-on. And this is when we're joining two or more of those independent clauses, or what we would call a complete sentence, when we're joining two or more independent clauses together and we're pretty much just squishing them. We have no conjunction, we have no punctuation, and so because of that, we again are running into that rambling type of sentence. It's going to be very abrupt, and this often causes your reader's eyes to catch and go back to the previous sentence to see if they missed something, and that's disruptive to their understanding of your material. So our incorrect example here is, I met Charlize in a yoga class at the YWCA, we soon became friends. So take a look at it for just a moment and decide where you think that the first complete thought ends and the second complete thought begins. Okay, So you might notice that the first complete sentence ends after YWCA and the second complete sentence begins at we. So we probably, again, have tons of options for correcting this. I'm just going to go ahead and put in a comma and a conjunction, which again is one of the easiest ways to correct most of these run-ons. So our example here is I met Charlize in a yoga class at the YWCA, and with a comma, we soon became friends. And again, we're going to use this comma because we have two complete sentences with a conjunction, and those two complete sentences with a conjunction, again, commonly need some sort of punctuation between them. Now, the final kind of run-on that we're going to discuss today is called the comma splice. And to be honest, this is probably one of the most common errors that I see in the classroom. And a lot of students think that because there's a comma in there or because there's an and in there, then it's okay. But what we have to remember is that there's very specific rules for sentences and punctuation, and we have to continue to follow those rules regardless of whether or not we think it's okay. We need to know these rules. So the comma splice is probably one of the most common mistakes that I see throughout my classes. And this is, again, when we're joining two or more independent clauses. And again, independent clauses, again, are another word for complete sentence. So when we're joining two or more independent clauses together, but we're squishing them together with only a comma. So we're lacking our conjunction. We have punctuation, but unfortunately that punctuation then requires usually a conjunction. So our incorrect example for today is I met Charlize in yoga class at the YWCA. We soon became friends. So you'll notice that this is very similar to the fused run-on we did on the previous slide. But whereas the fused run-on had no punctuation, no conjunction, this one does have punctuation. But unfortunately, again, it's missing that conjunction. And so we need to add that conjunction. And I'm going to correct it the same way I did the previous sentence. And so you'll notice it's actually fairly consistent and easy to correct most of these sentences. What you need to know is you need to know your punctuation, and you've got to know your conjunctions, and that's how you go about fixing these kinds of sentences. Now, when in doubt, we could put periods at the ends of each of these complete sentences, but what that results in is that simple sentence, choppy speaking style that to be quite honestly, is not a college level of writing. We're looking at compound and complex sentences. We're trying to expand our conversation, and simple sentences just don't get that job done. So we're looking at combining sentences, and often when we try that for the first few times, that's when we end up in the run-on area. So in summary, remember that a run-on is when two or more complete sentences, otherwise known as independent clauses, are put together without proper punctuation. And when I say proper punctuation, I mean those conjunctions as well. And the sentences are incorrect unless properly joined with the correct punctuation and of course, that conjunction. Thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed this lecture.